blokes, apostates from Islam, and stay-at-home mums. Good morning. I'm Nicky Campbell. Welcome to The Big Questions. Today we're live from New College in Leicester. Welcome, everybody, to The Big Questions. Right. So far, nearly 1 million people have signed the petition to bring back Jeremy Clarkson. Freedom to fracas, it declares, he says carefully. With a BBC investigation underway about the alleged handbags and pushing, we can't comment. But given the scale of the support for Jeremy Clarkson and the howls of protest at the apparent cancellation of the rest of the series of Top Gear, we ask, has Britain become hostile to blokes? Martin Daubney, former editor of Loaded, he's kind of, he's emblematic, isn't he? He sticks his head above the parapet, he says what he thinks, he does what he likes, and he just gets on with it. And he's a heroic figure for a lot of, not just men, but women, but he kind of cuts that role, doesn't he?
Well, he's an incredibly divisive character. On the one hand, he's greatly admired by his audience. I think it's precisely because he has the balls, frankly, to say what people otherwise are afraid to say.
I'm about to faint.
That makes him incredibly unpopular with his critics, and his critics tend to be the opposite demographic. So we hear a lot of angry, sort of, female voices. And it was interesting this week, I think, how, within 2 days, the same number of people had signed the petition for him to stay than signed the campaign for Page 3 to be dropped from The Sun in 2 years. So this guy is incredibly popular. But on the same hand, he became an interesting thing. He became a magnet, not only for sort of anger about Clarkson in general, but there was so much criticism about the fact that he was white and that he was male. And it's like, wow, what's going on here?
Well, let's take it away from Jeremy, if I may, and just talk about that broader issue and the underlying issue here. Is there a crisis in masculinity with a big M?
Well, we're often told that there is, because that's another sort of stick that's used to beat men. I hear it all the time. What's actually happening is that, being a man has changed radically because how we define ourselves has changed. We no longer do traditional jobs, the stay-at-home mum thing. I was a stay-at-home dad for 6 months, believe it or not, after Loaded. How we be men has changed. But where I'm really worried about all of this is particularly on university campuses. I used to be called the king of the lads, rather embarrassingly. My magazine was a standard bearer for the lad lifestyle, for which I became a great target of malice. Fair enough, it goes with the turf. But young British men, I think, are now being demonised on university campuses because the whole lad culture, the dapper laughs thing, he became this cartoon, caricature version of what a lad is, and he was used to contaminate the entire movement. Now, every young man on university campus who likes to drink and is a bit yobbish...
Banter.
Yeah, banter, but where does banter end? Where does it begin? Who knows? We are seeing an incredible suppression of free speech in our universities. In fact, Kate, you yourself were sort of taken off university campus because you're the wrong sort of feminist. Now, I think
I'm not sure that's got anything to do with dapper laughs. I think that's utterly...
I think it runs to the heart of the same debate, and that is about the fact that some people find it offensive, millions don't, but the minority of people who find it offensive are controlling what the rest of us are allowed to say or do. It's actually about freedom of speech.
It's about freedom of speech.
Well,
we just hear that.
Jeremy Clarkson is not about freedom of speech. It's about whether there was a fight. It's not. It doesn't matter whether there's a petition.
Let's move on to those who support him and those who feel that their freedom to be curtailed.
Let's talk about this crisis of masculinity or whatever. First of all, is there a war on men? Well, no, there simply isn't, is the answer. If you look at any of the corridors of power, men massively outnumber women in this country and all around the world. But is there, these days, that there's a difference between men, isn't there, and blokes or lads or this kind of culture, which, you're right, is a relatively new thing. 100 years ago, there wasn't this culture of, lad culture. It's a very modern 21st century thing.
I actually disagree with that. I think there were probably lads in the cavemen time. I mean,
but I don't think they were the same. I don't think that it was the same situation that we've got now with sort of like widespread, very violent online pornography, this kind of stuff that is new, and it's a new challenge for people to deal with. And is there, a reaction to that and a backlash against that? Are people... Because I think think that actually, you're right, young guys at university, they're being sold this story of like, yay, Jack the lad, drink loads, go out, you're expected to have hundreds of girlfriends and all this kind of stuff. And I think that they're being encouraged sometimes to behave in a way that isn't appropriate. And I think if people are pushing back against that, then that's great news.
There's a backlash.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, but there's never a backlash, as we can see, against the backlash. This is the point. And, some men feel they're not allowed to be men. I'm just, talk about the banter. When Jeremy Clarkson says, apologies to anyone who's offended by this, when he does a thing on German cars, and he said the navigation systems only go to Poland, there were complaints from... See, Milo liked it. We'll come to Milo in a minute. There were complaints from diplomats. There was outrage in the press. Isn't it just the sort of thing that lads like to say in a bit of banter with
But isn't there a difference between
I think the issue is not that bloke behaviour equals the behaviour of all men. That simply isn't true. It's this bullying behaviour that's unacceptable. It's unacceptable in the workplace. It's unacceptable in the media. That is the issue. Freedom of speech, absolutely, I support.
Abdullah, are men in crisis?
I think the problem is that Jeremy Clarkson, why are people bringing in his sex or gender in this? An individual in a workplace had an altercation with his boss. It happens all the time. Why are people focusing on his gender? Isn't that sexist?
Well, there's going to be an inquiry on that. Do you think that roles have become blurred? Do you think that some men feel that they are not allowed to be men anymore in our society in 2015?
I feel that there's a greater stigma on males than there would be on females. Certainly, if you see that if a woman did exactly the same thing as Jeremy Clarkson said, no one would say that. Is there a problem with women today or so on?
So it's kind of tougher for men.
They would view it as very sexist. So the fact that we're okay to bring up Jeremy Clarkson's gender in this shows the problem that there is an issue of stigma attached to men. Whenever we do something, it will be reflected in the media as part of our gender.
I'm sorry, speaking as a woman who does stand-up comedy, any time I do a show and something isn't perfect about this show, somebody starts talking about women in comedy. The idea that women are not stigmatised by the actions of individuals within their number is a complete myth. It's just
Milo, what is it?
To some degree, yes, men.
My point was
to the same
more
degree.
than men. We talk about women in politics and the way they dress. We don't talk about men in politics and the way they dress. The idea that men are specially stigmatised, I'm sorry, but that's a ridiculous...
It's not ridiculous.
The truth is
and it's offensive to say it's ridiculous because... Once again, it's just all dismissed. Now, I'm a committee member of the Being a Man Festival at the South Bank Centre, where we are trying to give men an opportunity to be able to talk about things that matter. The biggest killer of men under 45 in the UK is suicide. Now, what's happening? Why is this going on? Right? And I'll tell you why...
But to say...
listen,
but Martin, to
can I
suggest
talk?
that these... But if you're going to say this is not...
Let Martin talk.
What's happening is that the Campaign Against Living Miserably, the charity that represents this, is desperate for more funds to look into why this is going on. But they're not getting it. And I'll tell you why, because men don't qualify as a minority interest, and we don't get preferential funding. Right? You can bet your life if women start killing themselves, or Muslims did, or black guys, there would be, front-page news, guaranteed government inquiry, millions of pounds of funds. White men are...
Wait a minute. Sally Peck. Let's bring Sally Peck here. I mean, a lot of women are killed in domestic violence, disproportionately, many more.
And the funding being slapped.
Let Sally speak.
There's a huge problem in this country with gender equality. I mean, as you've seen recently in the global gender gap, we've fallen to 26th place in the world, which is really embarrassing. We used to be 9th place 10 years ago. But the real problem, yes, men have a much higher suicide rate, and that's because we tell children when they're 1 year old that boys and girls are different. And this causes boys to grow up without any emotional intelligence. People think, oh yeah, we need gender equality because this will get girls into STEM subjects, which is true. But even more important than that, we need gender equality so that boys won't be violent. There's a wonderful charity based in Edinburgh called Zero Tolerance, which is teaching gender equality to childminders, so that they can teach children that they're equal, they have equal opportunities, and they do it specifically to reduce violence from men to women when they're adults. We need to start much earlier than men.
OK, Milo, you want to come in?
Unbelievable, astonishing sexism. We have to teach young boys not to be boys so they won't be violent.
Why is being violent being...
Get out! I'm sorry. Like, gender, we teach boys and girls that they're the same, and that's a problem. They are different. When we do experiments on young babies and even on related animals, we know that certain children go for certain toys. Boys and girls are different. To give you some context for all of this, you have to understand a little bit about the history of feminism. There have been two main strands.
And here is our local expert.
Well, yes. Of course, because of course men aren't allowed to speak about anything that isn't to do with
no,
men,
the things
except
that you've
no one's
already
really
said.
interested in.
Yeah, let him talk.
Already said indicate that you know nothing about
All right,
it.
well,
so,
I'm
so
going to.
You've already
I'm going to talk to you a little. I'm going to talk to you a little bit
Kate.
about the problems that men are experiencing in society. And since you're not a man, perhaps you could like to give it a rest for a second. So there is a wider context in which men are suffering slightly. Even 10 years ago, it would have been ridiculous to say it. But very recently, we've seen a lot of structural advantages to being a woman crop up in education, in the workplace. Under 30, women earn more than men for the same work in the UK and the US now, which is an extraordinary statistic and something that people have to be very, very carefully convinced of because it sounds absurd. But there is a sense in which men, particularly young men, probably men our age, haven't necessarily experienced it, but younger men, 20-year-olds, there's an enormous problem. I read about this last year. I call it the sexodus, of men checking out of society, checking out of relationships, giving up on women, giving up on careers. They don't bother to go to university anymore. Now more women go to university, women get higher grades at university, more women graduate from university. Yep. All of the traditional imbalances between men and women have flipped, and very recently.
No, that's
and when
incorrect,
young men,
when you go
may I be allowed to
in the
finish?
business,
Sorry, I'm talking
correct.
about men, darling.
And you called them darling? How incredibly rude. And now you think it's funny. Well, this is exactly the problem. This is institutionalised sexism, and you're just sitting here doing it flagrantly and without even apologising.
Well, we just heard that it was an essential characteristic of men that they were violent a minute ago. So
no,
I guess
we did not. Nobody
That's exactly
said
what
that.
you said.
Nobody said that.
My point
That's just a lie.
My point simply...
Wait, I'm getting out of here. I'll tell you. No,
so I'm tempted to come with you, Nick.
If anyone in the audience wants to say something, please feel free to put up your hand, and I'll bring you in at this stage. And just for the sake of diplomacy, let me take it to you, Christine, and then you, Jane.
Thank you.
Christine, men still boss the world, don't they?
In terms of, well, I agree with the gentleman that there are huge demographic changes taking place. 60% of graduates in the UK are female. 25% of main breadwinners, working moms are breadwinners. A further 16% have the same earning capacity as their, or earnings as their partner. That is true. 10% of working dads now stay at home. They've left the workforce. We also have millennials and Gen Y who want more personal time. I really do empathize with the changes that are happening and how that must feel, but it's happening across society.
Let me ask you as well, what about the boardrooms, which you know very well? Are they still, you know, what was that programme, Mad Men, you know, that kind of testosterone-fueled environment, the figuratively smoke-filled rooms and the swaggering about and the banging of machismo on the table? Is it still like that, or is it changing?
It's changing, but it's at the beginning. In the UK, we're aiming for 25% for the top 250 companies to have 25% of the board members be female, but we are at the beginning of that journey. And when I say at the beginning, when you look at the next level under that, the executive committee, it's still less than 20% are female. So we have a long way to go in terms of gender equality in business.
Jane, as somebody who lived in the wrong body for a lot of years and lived as a man, you were kind of undercover in the other world, weren't you?
I was going to say maybe I can come in as a fifth column. I'm fascinated listening to Martin and Milo go on about this. Without getting into the existential, what does one count as, what I know is that I counted, as far as the public was concerned, as male, and then later I didn't count as male. And what I've experienced is the fear of going out and about on the streets, and men don't know they're born. They don't understand that fear. They don't understand the parking close to a station, carrying your keys in case somebody might come up to you. They don't understand, a friend of mine, 20 years in IT, trans woman, and she is now asked to make the tea, although she's a senior consultant in the room. So we see this all the time. What is going on here is men don't know how privileged they are, and it's a little bit, sadly, like my sister who grew up in a world without word processing, and now she has to do word processing. She really doesn't like it, and that's sad, and I'm sorry, but you have to move on. But men have had privilege, men have had privilege, men have had privilege, and now they don't have so much. I'm sorry.
May I just ask you this question? Do you think that perhaps your experience as somebody who's transitioned from male to female might be part of your experiences too? I mean, you're sort of claiming experiences now as a woman.
No, I'm not doing that.
Well, that's what you said. You said your experience changed as...
No. I very carefully said, because then you get very existential about what do I count as. I said I've experienced life wearing the male garb and not wearing the male garb. And the point is that wearing the male garb, you get away with murder.
Martin?
I think, your situation, heartfelt, this is the new thing, the transgender thing. A lot of men are confused about what that means. What I mean by that is, there's a lot of change. We need to get used to that. Dead right, absolutely. But we must never forget that the vast majority of people who are attacked or murdered in the UK or around the world are actually men. OK, other men are doing that. It's a male-on-male thing. And that's another sort of reason to prove that men are toxic, because we're killers. And that's what the message we hear all the time is about the terrible things men do. What about the great things men can do? When do we ever hear about that? Where are the surveys to prove men are good? There's a survey out this week saying that if you smile at a woman, you're sexist. This got global media pickup. It's ridiculous. It's like everything we do is sexist, conniving, and part of some grand
successes. I mean, of course, the great feminist academic Camille Paglia said if women around the world, we'd all be still living in grass huts. We know what men have done. Men have got us to the moon. Men built the pyramids. Men built the internet. Men did lots of wonderful things. But you're right that what we tend to hear a lot is that what men bring to society is this sort of toxic masculinity, which was alluded to earlier, and all these other sort of ridiculous offences. It's now open season, particularly if you're white and you're a man. And what feminists don't seem to appreciate the irony of is that they are relentlessly ridiculing people on the basis of skin colour and sex. And they don't seem to get the irony there.
In a second, let's Sally first.
Well, I just think that you're completely misinterpreting the situation here. And with the issue of violence, we're talking about male and male violence. What I'm talking about with early childhood education is giving all of the possibilities to all children.
Not saying here are the pink toys for you, here are the toy soldiers for you. So how does it
work?
Like
let toys be toys. Well, I mean, many studies have shown that when they're babies, if a baby cries, a girl child will be picked up much more quickly and held and comforted for much longer. She's taught by her closeness to her carer that her feelings count, they matter, and she gets a reaction. Whereas boys, in every study, it shows they're encouraged to play further away, they're not picked up as quickly, they're not comforted. So
it's not you're going to be a princess and you're going to be a superhero.
Yes, that's what it turns into. But even earlier than that, that's my point.
Yeah.
Boys' emotions are not listened to, and this is what causes the problems. Boys, there's not a toxic natural masculinity. It's not the nature. We are teaching them to do that.
Teaching boys to be toxic.
Not to care.
You see, the problem is that this sort of view leads to absurdities we now have in the education system. In the US, for example, where boys are judged to this sort of emotional, sort of feminine standard, where we've all got to be sort of emotive and talk about our feelings. The consequences of that is 1 in 5 American boys put on Ritalin because they're boisterous in class, because they're held up to this sort of touchy-feely feminine standard that isn't how boys behave. And what happens is we end up with a generation of drugged-up young boys. And if you look at the statistics, the number of kids that are on Adderall and Ritalin, whatever, in the United States, and it's beginning to happen here, it's monstrous. And it comes from this sort of philosophy.
First of all, feminists did not invent the global big pharma industry. I mean, that's just ridiculous. But secondly, I think you're really, really confusing what feminists are saying. I think you're really failing to listen. When feminists are talking about masculinity and the way that what I'm not saying is men are innately evil and awful. What I'm saying is that we live in a rather toxic culture where men are raised and told that they should be competitive and aggressive and detached from their emotions. And actually, this is wrong, and this is not doing men any favours or women any favours. And it ties in directly to the mental health issues that Martin is talking about with young men, and it ties in directly to the women being brutally murdered by their partners every week in Britain. And that's what we're challenging. It's not about attacking men, it's about challenging the culture that men are being dragged into and saying, you don't have to be a part of that, there are much better options for men.
Lynn, I thought you wanted to come in as we come towards the end. Of course, we've got to remember it's not just some women who are attacking sort of blokish blokes. Some blokish blokes feel some men are attacking them as well, and so on and so forth. Make your quick point.
Yes, no, it's interesting, isn't it? You said you were a stay-at-home dad for a while.
So yours is the last point, by
yes,
the way.
Indeed. And while stay-at-home fathers are actually seen as progressive in this society, hey, you're stay-at-home dad, aren't you brilliant? Aren't you amazing? Aren't you doing a wonderful job? Yet if you're a stay-at-home mother, you're retrograde. According to Nick Clegg, we're in an Edwardian society. They're harping back to the Edwardian days. We're in rose sepia-tinted glasses just because you're a mother. So where's that? That's sexist.
Thank you. That's all we have time for on that. And I think you brilliantly previewed our final debate, which is about stay-at-home mothers. So for that, I think a huge round of applause. Great synergy. Now, you may have something to say about that debate. I would imagine you would. Log on to bbc.co.uk/thebigquestions and follow the link to the online discussion. Join us on Twitter using our hashtag BBCTBQ. We're live in Leicester this morning, also debating the following. Do British Muslims have a problem with apostates? And do we discriminate against stay-at-home mums? So tell us what you think about those topics. Send us any other ideas or thoughts you may have about the show. Well, apostasy, posh word for giving up religion or faith, abandoning your faith, mainly used by believers to describe those who have renounced their beliefs for atheism or to convert to another faith. Well, in Islam, it also covers anyone who denies a fundamental tenet or creed, even agreeing that man evolved from animals, so human evolution and so forth. And it also covers anyone who's mocked Allah or questioned Sharia law. Now, at one extreme, punishable by death in some countries and imprisonment in others. Now, in Sharia civil law, apostates may have their marriages annulled, lose the rights to their children, lose their property, and be shunned by their families. Even in the UK, where everyone has the right to freedom of religion, ex-Muslims say that they've been made to suffer for renouncing their beliefs. So do British Muslims have a problem with apostates? Well, Amal, why did you leave? There you are. Why did you leave Islam?
I left Islam because I got educated. I didn't agree with the Quran being the revelation of God and Muhammad a perfect embodiment. In fact, I felt it was a questionable moral guidance that couldn't be applied to the 21st century. Those ideas mark you out as an apostate, and because of that, you face being rejected by your family, the community, and you face being called names like apostate, names like kafir, murtad.
So what has that been like for you?
It has been difficult because you grow up with a family, and just because you have ideological divide, you decide that you don't believe in the Quran. Does that mean that you don't want to be with your family?
But that's particular families. All families are different.
I'm talking about the context of a devout Muslim family and a devout Muslim community.
Is this a common experience, do you think?
I think it is a common experience for individuals that come from devout families and live in devout communities. If Islam to have a community of believers that strongly believe
the Ummah
that believe that the Quran is the literal word of God and Muhammad's supposed perfect embodiment, it cannot tolerate any form of dissent. So you are rejected, you are threatened with potential violence for breaking with this norm.
Have you been?
I have been, yes. And I have been, I'm estranged from my family because there was no way my family was going to accept that.
But there are hotheads and idiots in every walk of life.
Well, this is the thing. The headlines are grabbed by the so-called jihadists, the people who carry out vigilante violence. But what we're missing is the conservatives who sit behind that, the many Muslims who believe in that backward ideology and believe in that backward ideology, and even though they might not carry out violence, they will approve of it, and they do call you names, like I said, like murtad.
Well, okay.
Those are Sharia terminologies.
Well,
that carry the capital punishment.
In 23 countries across the world, it's part of the penal code. Let's get Abdullah. Let's get this sorted out. Let's sort it out once and for all. When all Sharia conditions apply in a perfect Sharia state, should apostasy be a criminal offence? Yes or no?
Well, here we are again, another groundbreaking Islam is evil or bad discussion and so on. And I think it's been done to death, unfortunately.
Before we go any further, could you just clarify?
But I mean, look, I could say that I became...
You've never done apostasy before.
I could say I became Muslim because I was educated, right? Just because... I don't think it's wrong to say just I became educated, that's why I left Islam. Please, can we just establish the ground rules on this? It's a straight question, then we'll move on to the other issues, because it's fascinating, because 23 countries across the world, it's in the penal code. When all Sharia conditions apply in a perfect Sharia state, should apostasy be a criminal offence? I don't accept the Victorian era translation of irtidad.
He will never admit to it.
No, I don't accept that there is no apostasy law in Islam. I'm following classical understanding.
People have been killed under apostasy laws around the world, so there is something going on.
In post-colonial secular states. Post-colonial secular states.
They are applying the Sharia.
And I say that I reject the even idea of there being an apostasy law in Islam in the first place.
Let me ask you one more thing. What does it mean? Wait, let's clarify first of all. What does apostasy mean to you then?
Well, apostasy, in English, apostasy just means changing your mind. Whereas in Islam, irtidad would be best translated as sedition or treason.
All right, which I saw in some states it's seen as treason or sedition to actually leave the religion. Let me ask you one more thing. Then we'll throw it into the mix with everyone else. I mean, you shared platforms with this London Imam, Haytham al-Haddad, who says that female genital mutilation is obligatory. He supports wife-beating, supports gays being killed. And he has said that apostates should be killed and that their blood is halal. Do you disown this disgusting bigot?
Well, first and foremost, I share platforms with atheists, Christians, Jews, even apostates and so on.
Abdullah.
Wait a second.
Just say it.
I think what is unfair is I could bedeck this entire audience out with people who've become Muslim, who've been ostracized by their family,
do you disown this disgusting
house,
bigot?
threatened, abused by their parents for becoming Muslim. They've had to spend the night in mosques because their parents have
do you disown this disgusting bigot?
Nick, he will never answer that question because he believes in a concept of tricking.
No, I believe in the concept of if you're going to talk about someone, invite them and let them speak for themselves. I'm only here to talk about ideas.
This is what he said.
I'm only here to talk about ideas.
This is what he said.
I'm not your Inquisition court. I'm not your Inquisition court. Well, firstly, bring Haytham Haddad and let him defend himself.
This is on the record. This is what he said.
You can only agree with I
will not accede to this Inquisition court you're going to set up to say, do you condemn this or do you condemn that?
So you're on here, but you're not going to express any opinions. Seems like a waste of time to me.
No, about ideas, not about people.
So here's
I haven't been coming to talk about people. I'm not anyone's lawyer.
Is the idea of female genital mutilation a good or a bad idea?
Well, female genital mutilation, I disagree very strongly.
Good. So you can say that you disagree with that, and you think it's a disgusting, bigoted attitude.
You asked me about Haytham Haddad, not FGM.
But he said it's obligatory.
FGM, I will give you my answer about FGM.
Osama Hassan,
invite him.
Well, I asked you to agree whether he supports wife-beating, killing gays.
So you say.
He said no. He does.
If
we've seen it, it's there.
We don't know.
Okay.
We've seen it on
you don't discern him. Osama Hassan, it's like turning your back on your family, though, isn't it? Some people see it as the ultimate treachery.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've heard many stories like Amal's, although attitudes are changing in younger Muslim generations, some of them. But we have to be honest about the history of Islam. People leaving Islam in early Islam, there was a vibrant debate about it, where some believed in freedom of religion, others saw it as treason. And that's when this capital punishment was introduced in ancient and medieval Islamic law. Unfortunately, it became the norm in the books, the idea that you would be killed, because it was seen as treason. And that carried on into this age, where you have the laws that you talked about. So in Saudi Arabia recently, for example, there's a young man being sentenced to death because he dishonoured the Quran in public. Al-Qaeda and IS in Syria and Iraq have executed 13-year-olds, accusing them of apostasy and blasphemy. This is a serious problem, and Abdullah, you should answer the question, simply.
What, about Haytham Haddad?
No, about irtidad. Do you regard it as treason? Do you believe in freedom of religion? Should Muslims have the freedom to convert to other religions or leave their faith, just as others have the freedom to convert to Islam? Yes. Or should they be killed if they do that? It's a serious question for the modern age.
Well, I was asked the question. I said, irtidad, as sedition and treason. But people within Islamic theology ultimately choose which belief they take in this world, whether they want to accept Islam or reject Islam.
Yeah, but
they face death.
The title of this discussion is, do British Muslims...
Okay, Amal come in. wait a minute, Amal.
It was ridiculous. It was made clear to me growing up as a Muslim, as being somebody who is born to a Muslim family, you have no choice other than to remain as a Muslim. That was made clear to me. And
don't blame Islam for your ignorance.
And you know what? Then I blame Muhammad, okay? I blame Muhammad. I do. Because because this argument that we're having about...
I've sat and listened to this ridiculous...
No, you get your chance. Let me say my point. Nick,
She's been speaking for the last 10 minutes.
No, Nick, let me make my point.
I'll come to you in a second. Go on.
I've not even spoken yet.
The problem, Nick, the reason why there is a division in the Muslim community is because it goes back to the founding person of Islam, Muhammad. Now, it's true. No, it's true. It doesn't say specifically in the Quran to kill people who leave Islam. However,
wait. Sunnah, wait, everyone. 2256. There should be no compulsion in religion.
It
says that.
But Nick, let's put it in context. Let's put it in context. There, in Islam,
not literalist,
the revelation of the Quran, there is something called a Meccan period when Muhammad was a minority and he was all peaceful and turned the other cheek. And then there was when he went to Medina and he formed an Islamic state. And he is quoted in the hadith books where he says, whoever changes his religion, kill him. And this is where ISIS, who are very Islamic, Saudi Arabia, who are very Islamic, refer to that. Do we ignore Muhammad? I say yes. But unfortunately, Muslims don't agree with me.
Let me just come back on that. I think the important thing is that we believe in religious freedom. People are free to leave Islam. Actually, the evidence is that the traffic is the other way around. More and more people are coming into Islam.
No, it's publicised. It's publicised.
Well, let her finish.
Let me finish. I've respected your right to have your say, and I hope you should show some respect to me as well. The problem with people like Amal and other ex-Muslims is they spend their time after leaving Islam demonising and attacking Islam.
That's not true. That's not true. There are more people who are in the closet.
Okay, listen. Wait. Okay. Let me ask you a question, Mohammed. You said that and you said it very clearly. Let me ask you a question. When you talk about demonising, of course, you were involved recently at the centre of this campaign against Majid Nawaz when he tweeted the Jesus and Mo cartoon. You tweeted Gushtaki Rasul. It went all over the world. That means defamer of the Prophet. That was a clear message, wasn't it?
He's an Islamist in a closet.
That was a clear message. Wait, let me ask. That was a clear message. You knew what you were doing. Kill. Yeah. That said kill, didn't it?
No, I didn't. That's a crime. I'm sorry. That's a crime in his native Pakistan to which he travels for business and work, the punishment for which is death. And you tweeted that publicly.
I feel, let me answer. And let me say that at that time, there were some very strong held views by me. Sorry, let me just make the point before you interrupt me. But I held views. I said things and did things which I regret in the heat of the moment. But what I don't regret is standing up for the honour of our Prophet. And as Muslims, we honour our Prophet.
There's a death penalty in Pakistan.
I'm sorry, Nikki, the suggestion which has been put out by atheists and humanists and supporters of Majid Nawaz, that I somehow endorse the violence. I somehow endorsed these death threats.
You tweeted I did not.
Okay, one at a time. Wait, everybody. Milo's coming. What do you want to say? Milo's partner, your partner's Muslim, isn't it?
Yes, he is, and he would be horrified by your slipperiness, and he would be horrified by your hypocrisy. You tweeted that you were going to inform Islamic countries that Majid Nawaz had committed this crime for which you used the Urdu, which is a crime punishable by death in Pakistan. You tweeted that you would inform Islamic countries of what he'd done. What is that, if not an incitement to violence toward his person, or a request for the death penalty?
Suddenly this seems to be a witch hunt against certain individuals who come onto the programme.
It is not a witch hunt.
I won't take any witches from Council of Ex-Muslims. Look, I'm really
Stop playing the victim.
Go on, Mohammed.
I'm trying to answer.
Go on, Mohammed. Let Mohammed answer. Let's wait. I'll tell you what, everyone. Shh. Let's have silence. Let's Mohammed answer. I know Kate wants to come in, and Abdullah, I'm going to come back to you.
I've said already, and I've said it on record, and I say it again, at the heat of the moment, things were said which I regret. If I had a chance again, I certainly wouldn't have done that. But I don't hide away from the fact that I want to defend my faith. I want to defend the honour of the Prophet. And things were done in the heat of the moment. But, you know, this is part of the problem. if you want to have a rational debate about Islam and Muslims, we have experts like the Council of Ex-Muslims. And if they spent less time demonising Islam and Muslims, people might be prepared to have them on...
Osama Hassan, wait, Osama Hassan, sorry I just want to try and get everyone to get a fair crack at the whip. Abdullah, I'm coming back to you.
Can I just say, I've spoken to a lot of ex-Muslims and those who've gone and come back a bit, become agnostics. And one of the biggest reasons why people become apostates in the first place is because they see a harsh and intolerant and mindless, brainless version of Islam promoted all over the world, including this country. And the best way to honour the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the best way to honour the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who is described as a mercy to the world, is to embody mercy and compassion, which is the fundamental message of the Quran. And many of our co-religionists have to understand that they don't defend the honour of the Prophet by becoming angry and calling for the death of blasphemers or infidels or apostates, but it is actually by showing mercy and compassion. And in fact, they will often defame and dishonour the Prophet more. ISIS and Al-Qaeda and these
Haddad,
people,
this man Haddad.
Well, people who present a harsh, intolerant version of Islam, they are defaming the Prophet, and they are defaming Islam and the Prophet.
Abdullah, do you agree with that? This is Allah is most beneficent and most merciful. So even if somebody in a Sharia state leaves the religion, they should be embraced as a fellow human being. That's just humanity, apart from being human rights. And that does happen, doesn't it?
I'm saying, yeah, ignorance defames the religion. But the point I want to make is that people who are from non-Muslim families, English families, they become Muslim, they're called race traitor, they are called terrorist. They are abused. So we see this actually happening across the board, not just with Muslims. So the fact that...
In all religions, or many religions.
You're picking on Muslims here is disingenuous and connecting it with some law that has to do with an Islamic state, of which we are not in an Islamic state, is evidenced very absurdly in the fact that not a single apostate in England has been killed.
Well, that's good. That's good.
So why do we keep bringing in this Sharia law matter when not a single apostate in England has been killed?
Do you understand why some people are... don't know what to think about Islam, or might be confused or suspicious or worried about it? Do you understand those concerns when people say one thing very reasonably on TV shows, but quite a different thing on Twitter? When people don't give straight answers to questions, do you understand why somebody who perhaps doesn't know many Muslims...
And just picking up from this point, that is absolutely true, because the Islamists will never... in a platform like this, will not come out and say, be straight. There is a concept...
What have I not been straight on?
There is a concept...
I've answered the question of FGM.
Yeah.
I've answered the question on
We're
what
not talking about
means.
FGM.
You want me to...
Here's the question you didn't answer.
I say I don't want to condemn people for ideas.
When all Sharia conditions apply in a perfect Sharia state, should apostasy be a criminal offence?
And I said that I reject the translation apostasy. It's inaccurate. Irtidad is translated as sedition and treason. Do you want me to repeat it again a third time and a fourth time? Do I not fit the stereotype of the ranting Muslim?
This is the problem when they politicise the faith.
Here's the thing. Of course, first of all, yes, of course, lots of religions do things that aren't very nice, and so do some people who aren't religious. That's not the issue. The issue is there a particular... is there a particular increased likelihood in Muslim communities that people who leave feel threatened, feel afraid, and also feel that they end up being ostracised from their family and their community? And the answer overwhelmingly does seem to be yes. It's a story that we hear a lot, and
you have no evidence for that at all whatsoever.
Well, I have a lot of evidence.
Because she's like the community, but we have evidence for it.
Ex-non-Muslims who become Muslim, and let them say their stories.
Okay.
Let them say their stories.
Sounds like a good idea. Let's get some audience. We'll go across to university. Good morning. Yeah.
I'm a Muslim. I'm a practicing Muslim. And to the lady, the reasons that she gave for leaving Islam, people also give the same reasons for coming into Islam.
Indeed, yes.
You need to understand that.
Yeah.
Okay, and also when it comes to apostasy, I'm not educated as these two guys, but I'm a Muslim and I follow my religion to the best I can. And I live in the West, born and raised in Africa, live in the West. I don't see that I'm on a collision course with these people. So I practice my faith and I follow the Quran. Your religion unto you and my religion to me. That's how I have friends who are Muslims and they're gay. I don't judge them. I am only responsible for who I sleep with, and I'm responsible for my sins. So when it comes to apostasy, my understanding, apostasy is not mentioned in the Quran. However, the Prophet has mentioned it in an hadith, say, those who leave the religion killed it. I researched into this, and my understanding is that this was said at the time when Islam was weak, coming up. Yeah, when people, when the Jews and Christians and pagans were coming into Islam, just to live, just to give the impression that Islam was not a religion worth following. So therefore, this was said. Okay. So fast forward into modern times, I don't think any Muslim would sit today and say, "Oh, we need to kill this guy because he's not Muslim."
Well, in 23 countries across the world. What's horrific?
He's saying, well, you know, these days we wouldn't kill apostates, but, you know, when Islam wasn't so strong, or at some point in the future, it would have been okay. It was never okay. To say that there was ever a time or a set of conditions in which it would be okay, that is horrific.
I think this is when Muslims who are in denial will be very selectful. Will be selectful in their understanding of Islamic history. There is, after the Prophet Muhammad died, or Muhammad died, he's no prophet to me, but when he died, there is a whole wars that Abu Bakr and Ali
really
waged. It's called the wars of the Murtad wars, or the Apostate wars, where Abu Bakr and Ali actually burned alive people that were accused of apostasy. So ISIS didn't invent this. This was done in Islam
just to say
under an Islamic state. So let's not be selective.
Look, Islamic tradition, some hadith are accepted, some aren't, some are seen as dubious, some are seen as genuine. Just on that theological point, you're a theologian. Very quickly on that theological point, Osama, burning alive and all that. Very quickly, got to move on.
We have these difficult traditions, actually, talking about killing apostates. Others saying, no, it's fine, people who became Christians from Islam, became Jews, etc., and who were left alone. The apostate wars were also political wars because it was rebellion as well. So there's an early discussion as to whether it was about apostasy or whether it was about political rebellion against United Arabia. Muslims have to grapple with these difficult issues. These are difficult issues in our tradition. The Ottomans repealed the apostasy laws in mid-19th century, 150 years ago. Al-Azhar in Egypt repealed, killing apostates 50, 60 years ago. And many Muslims don't know that. Many fundamentalist Muslims, literalists, want to bring that back, and they're doing it right now in Syria and Iraq and Saudi Arabia and other places. But Muslims have to have an honest discussion with their tradition. And of course, you can be educated and still be Muslim and a devout Muslim.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. You can join all the debates by logging on to bbc.co.uk/thebigquestions. Follow the link to the online discussion and tweet using the hashtag BBCTBQ. So tell us what you think about our last big question. Do we discriminate against stay-at-home mums? Follows on from our first debate. Well, it's Mothering Sunday, so I hope all the mums watching are eating chocolates surrounded by flowers, generally being waited on hand and foot, and enjoying the warm ambience of this morning's programme. What about the rest of the year? Once upon a time, women who devoted their lives to looking after their families were widely admired. Now they're all too often disparaged as, yummy mummies, ladies who lunch, are just too lazy to get a job. And the benefits and tax system does little to encourage women who just want to look after their kids. Do we discriminate against stay-at-home mums? Rachel Royce, broadcaster and mother of two, here's a question for you. Do we discriminate against stay-at-home mums?
I think we do discriminate in the tax system, don't we? Because we will, the government gives money to nurseries, it will give school vouchers to parents who want to both go out to work, but gives nothing for the stay-at-home mother. So obviously in the tax system it's discriminated against. Does society discriminate? I think it's become kind of frowned upon to be a stay-at-home mother. I mean, I never was. I was brought up, I went to school in the 70s and I went to a girls' grammar school, and then we were shown lots of films about contraception, horrible films about giving birth, and put off having babies. It wasn't the done thing. So as soon as I had a baby, I thought, well, a few months at home, get the breastfeeding done, then back to work, and that's what I did. But as time went on, and because of the industry that I work in broadcasting, very long hours, very long days, I began to question whether I was actually doing the right thing.
How did your children at home respond to you being away, being out?
Well, that's just it. I mean, I never went for the nursery thing. I went and looked at a nursery, and to me it looked like a Romanian orphanage, rows of babies. This is the 6-month-old, this is the 12-month-old. And I thought, oh, that's too heartless. And initially I was quite lucky because I had my mother to help and my then husband, and then that was all right. If I left the children with somebody who loved them, it was fine. But eventually I was in a situation, in various situations, where I left the children with somebody I paid. And I kind of struggled with myself a little bit, but I thought it is the right thing to go to work, because that was the way I'd been brought up. But now I talk to my children now about the experiences they had, and it wasn't really very nice to be brought up by somebody who didn't love them. She was efficient, but the love wasn't there. And at one time, my little boy used to go around the house picking up coins and saying, now can you stay at home and look after me, Mummy?
Oh. Oh.
Yeah, you know, I think we...
Lynn, come in.
Sad, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah.
Yes.
What's the evidence? What does the scientific evidence show? There's
Well,
that thing,
there's a huge
attachment theory,
yes,
isn't there?
there's huge amounts of evidence. The attachment theory is very well known. John Bowlby did a lot of research back in the 1950s. But it's what we've got to talk about. What makes us human, and putting our babies first is surely what makes us human, makes us a society. Babies will grow into responsible adults if they've had that loving, nurturing care when they're very young. Babies, you talk about babies, girl babies being picked up before boy babies. Well, I don't know any evidence about that. I mean, there's a lot of evidence done about a lot of different things, but it's really important to think about the life cycle. When you're at home, you're going to be at home for a short period of time. We're all living longer, we're all working longer. The government will get mothers at home who will go back to work. They will pay tax. A lot of them, like me, we paid a lot of tax. We went out to work before we had a family. You know, it's all about the life cycle, being there when it matters. And when babies are really small, the person at home, be it mum or dad, and it can be dad. I have said before that being a dad at home is seen as progressive, mother at home is a bit retrograde, but it's actually about having that person, as Rachel's just said, who loves that child more than anything else.
Oh, who's that? Oh, Chris, I heard a voice from... Yeah,
I agree with you that the childcare, particularly as babies, is incredibly important. But I think the issue is good childcare and not necessarily mother, father, grandparent, or somebody that's not part of the family. The love piece can come from the family with having childcare that's provided by non-family members. The issue here, and this goes back to the first debate, is that it's about good parenting. Parenting comes from nurturing, loving your child, from instilling discipline, from instilling and motivating your child. So I think that in terms of the arrangements for how a child grows up, there are different arrangements depending on what suits that family unit.
There has
to be diversity in order to be. There has to be diversity to allow that family unit to be the best that it can be. There can't be one method that says this is the way.
Lynn.
No, absolutely not. It's all about choice. And Mothers at Home Matter, the organisation that I work for as a volunteer and have done for 8 years, it's all about choice. But there is no choice for a lot of families today. Families are obliged, the government speak is, get back to work, you're hard-working. Mr Cameron, every phrase he comes out with, he'll talk about the hard-working family. And to him and to Mr Clegg, the hard-working family are the families where 2 people go out to work. It's not about the one family.
Sally, I'll bring this, I saw you nodding along there, Mohammed. I'll bring you in a second as well. You were agreeing there with what we heard from Lynn. Now, it's this point that the state does fund a certain amount of childcare in this country. We're not talking Scandinavian levels, obviously, but should the state fund a mother who wants to be her own?
Well, actually, I would say we're not funding Scandinavian quality, which is the real problem.
Yeah.
The problem with childcare in this country, as the House of Lords report found 2 weeks ago, is that the government is funding childcare that is unacceptable by Ofsted standards. A third of vulnerable 2-year-olds, who we are all, as taxpayers, paying to be in childcare, are going to nurseries that are not good enough, that they're poor or failing. So that's actually where the government should be investing money, not in having middle-class women stay at home.
No, that's not true. Middle class. I'm sorry, Sally. It should not ever be about middle-class families.
No,
it's about all children.
But if you're a single mother,
children should be able to have a stay-at-home parent. Why should poorer families suffer and not have that
stay-at-home parent? How about if a child says, Mom, why can't I go to nursery today? I love nursery.
Yeah, well, they probably they will say that when they're 3 and 4. How can a 6-month-old baby shout out, Mum, I want you, I don't want that carer?
Sally.
The baby can't say that.
First of all, I think that you are actually privileging mothers at home over fathers at home. And there's a lot of evidence that proves that how much a father is involved in his child's life is very important. Also, what about gay families? You know, How
I
are we
think
going
what
to
she's
fund
talking
that?
about is one parent being around the child, whatever the
but
gender. And I've read their literature, and that's...
Sally speaking, then I'll come to you,
We
Rachel.
need
Sally.
to value families.
Okay, I've
we
got
need
you on
to
the
have
list.
flexible working, incentivised by the government. We need to have men and women working part-time so they can be there for their kids.
But that
the
doesn't work for
suggestion
the
that
economy,
because I
Sally.
work or because my husband works, part-time or full-time, that we are not loving our children,
Rachel.
that we're not suggesting to them how important they are, is ridiculous.
Rachel.
Yeah, I don't think... I mean, I've read the Mothers at Home Matter literature, and it doesn't say anything about it has to be the mother. I mean, it can be the father as well. All I'm saying, really, is that if you were to ask the child would rather be looked after by somebody who loves them than somebody who doesn't. I'm not saying don't go to nursery school. I'm just talking about... parents. My own situation, I've been a single parent for a long time, and I've had to work, and having to work and be the breadwinner and go, you know, I've been doing 12-hour days by the time I've left home. The children haven't been brought up by me. They've been, as children, looked after by somebody who didn't love them very much, and when they were teenagers, they've been latchkey kids. They've been locked out because I've forgotten to leave them a key. My child broke his arm once when I was 100 miles away. You know, that's the culture that mothers have to go to
Any
work
audience comments,
now.
please? And Sally, then I'll come to you, Kate, and I know, Jane, you're on the list as well. I'll tell you what I'm going to do in a radical move. I'm going to go to the audience first, and then you can regroup and gather your thoughts. Let me see now. Lady there, first of all. Good morning to you.
I've got twins, and I'm very lucky. I got maternity pay, and I got to stay home for a year and look after my twins. However, maternity pay stays exactly the same whether you have one baby or twins or 4 babies. So, you know, that the government need to really look at that when people do have twins or multiple births. And, you know, I didn't have to give up my job because me and my husband, we both work part-time, and when I work, he looks after the children. When he works, I look after the children. Not everybody can do that, but it was essential for that first year for my twins that I was at home and I looked after them.
Good for you.
Right on the blue shirt. Hi.
Hi there. Yeah, I have a 9-month-old son, and I'd just like to say that when I'm off with him for the whole day, it is definitely not a day off. It is incredibly difficult looking after my son for the whole day on my own. So hats off to my wife, who's on maternity at the moment. I think it's not just the government, it's the whole society. How difficult is it nowadays to be able to live on one salary? Okay, have you ever tried buying a house around here? It's impossible, and now students are paying £9,000 a year fees. They're coming out with lots of debt. We are telling them you must go out to work, or you're going to have to wait until you're 40, 45 to be able to afford to have children.
And a lady back there, yeah.
That's so right.
I think one of the problems for me, I don't have kids, but thinking about the situation, you know, we do brand stay-at-home mothers as lazy, as you mentioned in the introduction, but a recent YouGov poll has shown that when both parents work the same number of hours, the women are still doing the lion's share of their child rearing and still doing the lion's share of the housework. How can women be expected to do both roles and balance that fairly to their work and children?
Yeah, Mohammed, you were agreeing, when Lynn was talking earlier on, you were sort of nodding sagely to some of those early years being so important.
It's so important. I mean, in my family, I've got 3 daughters. My wife chose to stay at home because we thought it was important to have one parent, you know, at home bringing up the children. I'm surrounded by pretty strong women, so unlike your household, I'm a minority when it comes to
girls everywhere.
Girls everywhere.
Yeah.
But I think it's so important that we stigmatise stay-at-home mothers, and we also stigmatise women who choose to go to work. And I think each parent, each household will have to make that decision. Absolutely. The government has to provide more affordable childcare, and it's going to be of a higher quality. And I think that's so important.
I'm sorry, what the government should do,
I'm spreading the love this morning.
should do is the money should follow the child. If the government gave families the money to decide what they would rather do, whether they'd rather go out to work or whether or not they'd like to spend some of that time... Choice. It's all about choice. And unless the money follows the child, it won't
Mumsnet survey paper today, I think it was 88% of mothers said they would like to spend more time at home or all the time at home if they could possibly do that. Of course, economically, it's really, really tough, as we heard. So
I think what would do... Wouldn't dads want to do the same thing?
I think what would be... Yeah, well, that was a Mumsnet service in the paper today.
I think what would help more with help parents is those who decide to say, do part-time work and take their children to nursery. Nurseries are unaffordable for many families. It's very expensive. So maybe the government could help with reducing the costs so that
but childcare,
we can come to an...
childcare does cost. It costs a lot of money.
It's unaffordable.
It is unaffordable, but then surely... a lot of people paying more per hour to pay their cleaners to come and look at their after their houses than they pay to have their children in childcare.
Decent childminders and child carers deserve to be paid properly.
They deserve to be paid properly.
There are also lots of women like my wife who took 2 years off maternity, going back to work, who are basically paying for childcare that basically their salary doesn't even really cover it. Absolutely. They're basically working for free.
Kate.
Because childcare is so expensive.
That childcare cost should not just be on her salary, it should also be on your salary.
Everyone around here is called Kate.
Sorry,
I might add to that we also know that there are very high levels of discrimination against women in the workplace when they go away on maternity leave, and the majority feel that they come back to a job that isn't as good effectively as the one that they left, that they lose clients or they lose aspects of responsibility. So it's very difficult for women to come back and then be told that their job isn't quite as good as it used to be. You can understand why they end up staying home. The solution is much more flexible working opportunities for everybody, for men and for women. The solution is to have, maternity leave and paternity leave be equally long so that both parents get a chance to do that. And the other solution is that we talked a lot now about people, how you need to live on 2 incomes, how hard it is to live on 1 income. And of course, there are a group of people who are not only living on 1 income, but raising children at the same time, and that's single parents, and we need to do a lot more for them.
Abdullah, you've got a thought on this? Well, I mean, early years, terribly important, obviously. I mean, there's research on both sides. There's research that talks about attachment theory. There are a lot of contradictory results which say that it's really important for children to get out and about, to socialise and so forth.
When they're three,
Sure.
not when they're...
When they're 3, she says, OK.
I think for all of human history, children have been raised by their parents. It's something that works. It's something that's part of our humanity. And if we live in such a very capitalist society, such that everyone has to work full-time and can't have that human attachment, then I think that's a very inhumane society, and I think that's something to deal with.
I think that raises the question on whether...
Isn't it great we're all agreeing with each other?
That raises the question whether we're just going to work for economic benefit. Obviously, that is key. But there are also, we talked about the demographic changes in the beginning, there are many women that go to work because they want to go to work. They find it fulfilling. And they find that they're better parents because they work. Since we brought in personal examples, I'd like to share mine. I've been working for over 30 years. I have a 28-year-old, a 25-year-old, and a 14-year-old. I can't think of more balanced children. Why? Because my husband and I worked together. We provided that love. Do we have external help? Yes, but we made sure that that help was good. But I think that's one method. I wouldn't possibly be prescribing that to everyone. The point here is choice and respecting each choice. I think stay-at-home mothers and stay-at-home dads is the toughest job there is, and they should be applauded.
Jane, you're a parent.
Oh, gosh. Well, I'm a parent, and I've single-parented. I'm hearing a lot of people sort of agreeing but disagreeing. The basic problem is we all want choice, and if you step back and look at society, society is not set up to allow that choice. Society allows that choice for people with privilege, and it's set up in the way the state moves the cash around. And my experience, so we're swapping over experience, I single-parented for 5 years or so, and I was part of a consultancy where there were other women single-parenting. And, oh, look, you can do part-time, isn't that wonderful? So we're organised so that you can do single... No, what it meant was we ended up doing the same amount of work, get paid about 60% of what the men doing full-time were, and did the children on top of that. Society is not geared to give people choices.
Sally.
I agree. And one thing I would just add also is that we're talking about the choices that we're able to make and about paying cleaners and stuff, but actually... what the government needs to do, because if we're talking about do we discriminate against stay-at-home mothers, we need to think about the most vulnerable children.
Because it's rich, they've got the choices, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. And we need to think about people who, need help with parenting skills. I mean, we're making an assumption, everyone's making an assumption here that you kind of pop out of the womb knowing how to be a parent. And you really don't. I mean, they don't teach it in schools. You're saying in the 70s, you're kind of geared up to go into the workplace. And we need more support. And that's the other thing this House of Lords report found was that either through, the NHS, you can have support for parenting, for mothers and for fathers to teach children how for language
But if
acquisition.
you're not at home, if you're not at home, I'm sorry, it's
Lynn, 10 seconds. 10 seconds.
If you're not at home, you don't learn how to become a parent, and it's all about learning. You learn through the process of parenting.
Well, listen, thank you all very much indeed. Thank you.